the Supreme Court deciding to simply leave and not mess with some pretty tough sanctions issued against lawyers for Trump, a group of lawyers who faced the sanctions over their lies and baseless claims about Trump losing the election and lying about that fact. And one of those lawyers has even bigger problems, Sidney Powell, the face of Trump's coup efforts during the November 2020 press conferences with Giuliani. She pled out already. So beyond those sanctions in court, she also pled guilty in that Georgia RICO case. She is Trump's co-defendant there. Now, Trump's lawyers and former lawyers are facing all kinds of heat over all kinds of plots. Now, some of this takes a long time. Our legal experts and reporters have emphasized that in the coverage. And it's not supposed to be fast because people are afforded rights and review. And some of this stuff is fairly unprecedented. But there's new heat this weekend over the fraudulent electors plot. One Wisconsin elector telling 60 Minutes that ultimately whatever they were going to do to lie about and cheat about the campaign was the product of getting tricked by the Trump campaign.
We were tricked. The January 6th committee saw it. Jack Smith, specifically in his indictment, refers to some of the electors were tricked. That was us.
How do you feel about that now?
I mean, terrible.
You know, one answer to that is like, whatever. This is their defense. And instead of saying we did it, we were all about it, they're saying we were tricked, it's somebody else's fault. Another part of this is that's part of the theory of the case. In other words, even if some of these people weren't 100% tricked and they just thought they could get away with it, thought maybe they would get Trump back into office. That's what we've seen in other societies where coups are rewarded if they work. Well, on the flip side, there's a lot of evidence that the prosecutors want to use to show that this did start at the top, not in the middle or the bottom. And then you have Trump's legal calendar. He's paying up hundreds of millions of dollars from that fraud suit I mentioned. He's got the first criminal trial set for New York, March 25th. That's over the 2016 hush money issues. And then the open question we're waiting on any day, could be tomorrow, could be later this week, could be next week. Will the Supreme Court fast track what you see in red there, the appealed Jack Smith coup trial? Well, we're tracking all of this. I want to bring in New York Times Magazine legal correspondent Emily Bazelon. Welcome.
Thanks so much.
If the Supreme Court does not fast track the coup trial, which is currently on appeal, then the arguably smallest case, the Green hush money trial, goes first. If the Supreme Court greenlights the coup trial that's currently on appeal, if they say we don't need to slow it down, we don't need to review it, the New York DA has already said he would fall back and the coup trial could go first. How much does it matter what goes first when we're talking about the first ever trials of a former president?
I think it matters a lot. I mean, the trial about January 6th is about an issue that is of clear, huge national significance. The New York trial is a smaller matter. It's about hush money payments. Yes, it's an allegation, a set of charges about interfering with the election, but it's based on a more novel legal theory to get it up from a misdemeanor to a felony.
Right.
And I think especially when you think about the public perception of what's really at stake, you don't have to explain to people that a former president not respecting election results is a big deal. You can argue about whether that's what happened or not, but it is a big deal inherently. And I think that there's a much harder argument to make about the hush money payments rising to the same level of significance.
Yeah, and you're speaking to something the prosecutors deal with, which is you have all these crimes you could prosecute, but you exercise judgment on what you do. So a larger, more important case might be a priority over the unimportant case. It almost sounds obvious when I say it that way, but that's how it works, because they don't go after everyone. And here, I know you always like to think, we can put the arrows back up. I know you always think of trials in terms of prominent rappers. And the Green hush money trial is fundamentally misdemeanor Elliott. I mean, it is a misdemeanor that they are converting to make it more serious. And the coup trial and appeal above it is more like, I know who you're thinking of, J.O. felony. It's an actual set of election felonies. And by the way, as I always say, if Trump's innocent or acquitted, fine. But if that were proven against any official, that would be a big deal. And you know that while the right is selective, you know they think it's a big deal because all they're ever criticizing is alleged election interference, talking about alleged election integrity and all these other things. Because what does that mean? At the core is it would be bad to mess with elections.
Exactly. And so I think that's the reason why the order of the trials actually matters a great deal. And as you started by saying, some of this depends on the timing of the Supreme Court. We've already been waiting for the Supreme Court to decide whether to take this case at all. And if it does decide to hear Trump's appeal, what kind of calendar to put that appeal on. And those are really crucial questions because the clock is ticking and delay is a huge aid to former President Trump, no matter what the results are.
Yeah. Well, I got one more case for you, which is the fraud case. Everything's going so fast. It's like that was Friday. But we did a breakdown looking at the fraud cost along with all the other costs. And we'll put that up here because it's actually quite striking. The fraud loss there is $355 million. With the interest on top of that, other penalties, legal fees, and the 2 defamation cases, which you've covered for us here on this very program, altogether $600 million and counting for someone who, according to the state of New York, has roughly 2B. So that's approaching there a quarter of the net worth and counting.
Right. I mean, this is an enormous amount of cash to have on hand. Trump is going to have to either secure a bond, put up this money somehow or other during the appeal. He doesn't get to just not pay it. That's not an option. So I think we're going to see, you know, how much money he comes up with himself, from what sources, whether he tries to use, you know, campaign money for these kinds of expenses, the way he's been doing for his legal bills. It'd be hard to justify, I think, legally, but then you look at enforcement questions. So it's really interesting.
I'll show enforcement. This is new. Letitia James saying this is new today. She will seize the Trump property as you would with any other losing defendant if they don't pay. Quote, if he doesn't have the funds to pay off the judgment, we'll seek judgment enforcement mechanisms. We will ask the judge to seize his assets. That's how it works. It seems like she's not playing around.
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, I think Trump can do things to prevent that from happening. And presumably he's not going to want that kind of embarrassment of having his assets seized. But who knows? Because he also really likes to make this into a big fight, especially with Letitia James, right? And so it's possible he could say, come after me. I mean, this is an order of magnitude that's so great in terms of the money involved. It really changes the stakes.